Good morning. I know we have probably a few more people rolling in, but we thought we would get started. Thank you all for joining our Women in Technology program this morning. I think most of you know who I am, but just in case, I'm Jennifer Gray. I'm the founder of Market Street Talent. We are an IT staffing and consulting company located right here on the Seacoast. And we are excited to be here with you again this morning for our second annual Women in Technology event. This complements our longstanding fall Women in Technology event. And I recognize a lot of names and some faces, so thank you for joining us again today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items to go over. If you haven't already, please mute yourself to minimize any background noise. And we encourage you to set your view to presentation mode. It's easier to see the speakers more clearly. You can use the chat feature and the Q&A feature in the right-hand corner of your screen. Share a comment or a question. We will be taking some questions and answers at the end of the program. We don't have a lot of time, but we would love to hear your thoughts. Hopefully we can get to most of the questions. We will be recording this presentation also. So if you would like a copy, please feel free to reach out and we can share one with you, and you can share it with anyone that wasn't able to attend today. Big thank you to the team who worked to bring this event together. We have Jen and Marie of Market Street Talent, Jill McFarland of Bottom Line Technologies, Stephanie Baxter of New Hampshire Tech Alliance, and Kim Eckenrode of Nashua Community College. Thank you, ladies. And also big thank you to our panelists who answered our call and said yes to the invitation to share their thoughts and stories with you today. Thank you so much. We're calling this program the Great Representation, welcoming inclusion and equity for a better tomorrow. And we will focus on the crossroads between two important topics: diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the Great Resignation. Through a panel discussion, we'll discuss strategies to see and take advantage of DE&I opportunities of the Great Resignation in order to attract and retain top talent and foster an environment where all employees feel welcomed and valued. This discussion is designed to help inspire women who seek opportunities in technology, both who are just entering the tech field, as well as women who are pivoting into tech. And also to encourage companies to see the Great Resignation as a great opportunity to actively and intentionally build a diverse representation of talent within their organizations. So here with us today to talk more about their experiences and share some of their stories are women with broad experiences and bright futures. Our discussion would be led by Kim Eckenrode, the Career and Technical Education Pathways Director at Nashua Community College. Our panelists include Jillian Tierney, Chief People Officer for Uniguest, and Ashley Taylor, Director of Global Talent Acquisition at Acronis, who will help shed light on human resources within a growing technology company. We also have Lisa Smith, lead mentor at Promeneo Tech, who is re-entering the tech industry, and Linda Ferlizzi, a speech pathologist who's in the process of changing careers into technology. Welcome, ladies, and thank you.
Hey, everyone. We'll take a moment as we're all putting on our cameras so we can start the conversation. The first thing I want to talk about, or us to actually really delve into today, is the impact of the Great Resignation. Let's talk about how the Great Resignation is impacting IT just in general. Who wants to go first?
Kimberly, I can say a few words. I'm Jillian, Chief People Officer, and I've been in HR for a long time. I'm seeing a lot of pros and cons to the Great Resignation. From the employer perspective, it's certainly a challenge. So it's a job seekers market. Candidates and current employees have many opportunities out there for them, which obviously is a challenge for an employer to be always hiring, training, and having, people leaving because of so many great opportunities. So it's hard from the employer perspective. From the candidate perspective, I think it's a great thing that's happening. And I do think the future of work will be forever changed as a result of this. And people have many opportunities. Now the geographic locations where people can look for work is everywhere, where many, many, many companies are offering 100% remote working. I think that change will stay. It kind of started with COVID, but I don't think that'll go away now. And I think that's a wonderful thing for all employees, all people, as far as better work-life balance and having the flexibility that people need to work from home and accomplish what they need to accomplish for their families and their personal lives. So I think it's a great thing. And I also think employers are now challenged more than ever to make sure they have a great place to work and have a respectful workplace and a place that people can grow, and really they have to focus on employee engagement if they want to survive this great resignation. So I think it's overall a positive for the workforce and for all companies. Certainly for those of us hiring, it can feel painful, and for hiring managers, it can feel painful, but I generally think it's a positive, because I don't think we'll ever go back to, at the office every single day, 9 to 5, recruiting in a, 50-mile radius. I think those days are permanently over, and I love it.
Ashley, what are your thoughts?
No, I mean, Jillian said it very well. I mean, I completely agree with everything. I think if I think about it as from the perspective of women and women in tech, this brings a lot of opportunity, right? I think typically, women are the ones who sometimes are caretakers, and this flexibility is really going to open up the door for a lot of women. I also think where so many companies now realize, for employee engagement and even just better results, and is bringing diversity of thought and backgrounds, and they're really understanding the value of women in the workplace, and other DE&I efforts. And so this really puts women in a great position. Companies, it's a competitive market for technical talent in general. And then if you take women within technology, everybody's fighting for women in technology right now. So really, I think this is putting women in a very, very, strong place. From an employer perspective, it's difficult for us. And we really have to rethink how do we attract talent? How do we engage our employees, like Jillian was mentioning? But I really think I think the Great Resignation is like the great attraction. What do employers need to do to attract, more women? And then how do we retain them? And that's what I think we're really thinking through.
I think that's a great point. And the word resignation, even though some people are resigning and moving to a different job someplace, but there are people who are retiring or shifting careers or something like that. What is that doing to the hiring? Because you're losing probably the higher levels of some people. So are you able to find people with the qualifications, or are we moving people up in them? Are we finding any places where there's skills that we're just missing, that because of retiring, that those old skills aren't there?
I can answer first, and then Jillian, if you want to jump on. I think from what I'm seeing, it's not necessarily for people retiring. I think it's more, especially in technology, things move so quickly and they change so rapidly that I think it's less of, people retiring with legacy technology and trends that we'll see, in this space. We definitely have to think about how do we promote within, how do we support our employees, continuously train them and engage them so that we don't lose them. But I think for me, from personally what I'm saying, it's less of not having or losing, different skill sets, but it's more about just how do you compete in the market to get them, because there's more positions available than there is people. So it's not necessarily like not being able to find the right skill set. It's how do you can find those people, but how do you then convince them to come work for your firm?
Yes, and I can add that I think now, because of the competitive market, employers are having to be more flexible with their job requirements. So I have seen, in the past, a finance department might require a CPA, or a programmer role might require a bachelor's degree, that those requirements are coming down because they want to be as flexible as possible. And companies are ramping up the internal training, and it's really needed because things change so fast and because it's hard to find people. So I agree. I'm not seeing a lot of retirements per se, but just the movement because of all the opportunity and the ability to work from anywhere for any company in any location, that the hiring managers are reducing the requirements, less focus on college degrees. And I'm also seeing companies develop their own training programs. And I've seen some companies do some really creative things that I think are going to compete with colleges. So if I'm not mistaken, I think I read Google was creating a university, and I also saw like a sales tech training program that was guaranteeing a job for people that went through a 12-week sales training in a tech company, that young people might say, hey, instead of going to college, I could do one of these things. I'm getting job guarantee if I complete the program. It's less expensive. And now you're getting more people. So I've seen a lot of creativity come from this.
Oh, that's interesting. I want to kind of pivot to Linda and Lisa. As we're talking the Great Resignation, I know both of you started thinking about Lisa re-entering tech, Linda entering tech before the Great Resignation. So how has this change and this flux, has it changed how you've looked at looking for jobs or the careers that you wanted? What impact has the Great Resignation been on your job search or pathway?
Well, for me, I know that when I first, this has been kind of a 4 years now that I started the self-directed learning at home, and while I was working a full-time plus job. And at that time, I'd poke around and look and see work opportunities, and okay, they were all office. Remote just wasn't a thing. And in the past, I've been tracking this since COVID, and the remote opportunities have just gone through the roof. It just seems like there's a few niche type companies that really want their workers in the office, and they're not offering that. I shouldn't say niche because that's probably not the right word, but when I look for jobs, I'm seeing remote jobs everywhere. It's either in the office or remote. Ideally, as a person entering the field, I would love to be able to have the flexibility of both, because I would like to be able to be with someone in person and live, because it's just so much easier to ask a quick question to, I would think, but maybe not. I've heard that some people have shared time, a Zoom call where the team is all together in it, and they might be working, so that you can look at someone and ask a question. That would work. I think that it just has created a lot of opportunity, and I am very excited about the companies who are creating opportunities to train someone like me who has a broader knowledge. And if I can get into a company and they can train me what they want me to know, I'm going to be the perfect employee. I want to stay. I want to work. And I can do anything that you teach me to based on the skills that I already have. So I think it's a great time to be entering the field.
Lisa?
I would agree with that. I think when I took some updated education to basically get my skill set in line with technology today, I did not consider going back full-time in any way, shape, or form, because engineering or software development or software engineering is a full-time gig. And I wasn't willing to do that because I have a work-life balance that I love. So I think the Great Resignation has offered many, many more hybrid jobs. And for me, that's a really great thing because I'm not willing to give up that balance. I have a family. I have other things that I do in my life, but I also love software and I love development and I love tech. So I really wanted to be back in the workforce. And I think this has given, as Linda so eloquently put, has given us many more opportunities than we would have had before to have that balance. So I think it's a great time to be looking for a job in tech.
Which is awesome. I think that's excellent. So now I want to kind of pivot to the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what work can the tech world do to make DE&I a priority? And is there anything that you've learned, maybe from other industries, that we could do? So what are some ideas?
I would love to jump into that if that's all right. I think that flexibility that Jillian spoke about at the very beginning is key. I think offering an opportunity for people to have a flexible work schedule. I think the other part of it that Linda spoke to was I like the idea of co-working with people. So I like the hybrid option, work in an office, but work at home. I also like providing team building opportunities, regardless of whether you're 100% remote or not. All of those things make people want to be involved in a company and make people want to stay in a company. And I think that the third thing I would mention would be mentorship for employees, having a senior person mentor a junior person, which goes to team building, but also goes to that transfer of knowledge and bringing someone on board quickly. And all of that would get me to stay in a job.
Yeah. If I can piggyback off that a little bit, just that last point, Lisa, I think the mentorship is a huge piece. I know right now I'm actually rolling out a global women in tech mentorship program for my firm as just one of the many ways we're looking to kind of continuously engage, our women. I think for women, really those first and second promotions are critical in their career across any industry, right? But especially in technology. And so making sure that we're connecting women in our firm with the right mentorship, the right access to leadership level, feeling like they creating an environment that creates open communication. Our mentors are, some of them are more senior women in our firm, a lot of them are men within our firm, right? Creating that allyship and just creating an environment where an inclusive environment, right? And so I think it's so important. And that's just kind of one example of something that we're doing to try and support women who are a little bit earlier on in their careers or considered high potential, right? We've also identified those women that will be included in this are the high potential women. So really kind of making sure that we are looking at who is high potential and how can we, retain them, develop them, upskill them. So that's one of the things that we're doing.
Kimberly, I can add, I'd like to think that the technology industry would be leaders in DEI. We're leaders in so many other areas. It's known as a progressive industry. It was known for doing more flexible working probably than other industries even before this change. So I'd like to think that we could all continue to be leaders in DEI. It's somewhat company specific, and I think it depends a lot on the leadership. I'll just name a couple things that I think are super basic that really help is to have strong core values for the organization, and that hopefully one of those includes respect or people or something along the lines that sort of sets the tone for what's expected in terms of behavior within an organization. And these are real bottom of the barrel basics in my mind. Diversity, equity, and inclusion training to me is basic, and should be happening, because despite everything happening in the world, you still run into things that are not okay in the workplace, and training at least sets the bar of setting the expectation. So those are a couple things. And then it's really the organizational commitment to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that can look like many different things. It could be, DEI groups internally, it could be programs, it could be mentoring programs, training programs, great maternity leave policies, just to name a few.
Jillian, it's funny that you mentioned that about, technology companies. We're not always at the forefront of the DE&I efforts. And I guess I never really think about it that way, but it's so spot on. I think a lot of it too is you'll find, there's some technologies or some technology companies, right? Like the Googles of the world that are well established and they're large, and they're going to have those things in place. But a lot of, women are also going to be looking at startups and smaller firms, and, they don't have that in place because really they're just getting going, right? And things move so quickly and rapidly. And by the time they kind of get to a good place, maybe they're being bought out by another company, or maybe they're going public. So things just change so quickly that I think a lot of tech firms don't always have the time or resources available to really build that up. So thinking about just, some of the basic things Jillian said, or even just, just keeping that in mind when you're searching for jobs, right? Like what's really important to you, what motivates you, and understanding, okay, if you go to sort of a larger, well-established firm, some of these, networking groups, and it's going to be really well established if that's really, really important for you. And if you go to a smaller technology company, that may not be well established. And what can you do, as an individual, or even just, creating conversations, with your managers or whatever it may be, just understanding kind of like what's important to you and what those differences may be for those firms.
Yes,
I think
absolutely. It's real, it would be so wonderful if I had a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, but we don't have that. We're about 360 employees. We don't have that yet, but larger companies will have that, and we'll have a lot more programs. But you could still have a fantastic culture that's inclusive, even at a small size, if it's the right leadership.
so. Linda, is this something you're looking at in your job search? Are you looking at small? Are you looking at large? Or are you looking at DE&I as your, and I know you're not at the point where you're immediately ready to completely shift, but
I am not looking at the huge, I have no aspiration to be working for Google or Amazon or those, whatever, what's the acronym, the name for them? I don't know. Probably not a small, I'm not interested in a really small company because I need the mentorship, and that might not be available, but a small to mid-sized company would be terrific. Diversity and inclusion is very important to me. Very important. I want to see that at work. As far as diversity for women, definitely. I represent an older group of women as well, where there might be no representation or very, very little. So to get them to look at me as a viable candidate is important, and not to be dismissed because I'm not in my 20s would be important. But looking at, I'm here in southern New Hampshire, which is, I guess, a suburb of Boston nowadays. It wasn't when I was a kid, but it is now. And, is everybody in the office represented? That's important to me. And it's something that I will look at. And it's something that I have looked at in other circumstances to look around and see what I'm seeing. It's important.
I would like to piggyback on that for something else that has intrigued me, and I've told you this before. So as those of you may have heard in the intro, Linda is a speech pathologist who has decided she wants to learn how to code and wants to code. And I am just fascinated. I've been fascinated this from the minute I met Linda. And to me, this is also another part of the Great Resignation. How many people are pivoting? Now, to me, Linda, this is a big pivot to go from speech pathology to coding. Why? What precipitated this? What is it about coding that you think is different than what you're doing now? And maybe that will help us understand the people who could pivot to us too.
Okay. So healthcare, I've been looking for a way out of healthcare for a long time, for over 5 years, and I'm not even going to go down that road. Anybody who's in healthcare knows when I say, I shouldn't say everybody, but a great many people know, I got to get out. I was at a point in my life where I had about an hour to myself every day, and I couldn't not be doing something. And I was poking around online trying to find something to learn. And it was then that I realized I could start teaching myself to code. And it was exciting to me because I've always been, since, I won't say what decade, but a long time ago, when technology first started coming into the home, I've been that IT home person, answering all the questions, and it's been fun. I've always enjoyed it. I love it. And if I had had unlimited money, I'd have been buying every toy that I could get, but I didn't have that. But I did have a personal computer in 1983, which I learned to do word processing on. I didn't learn to code because at the time, to learn to code, it was not, couldn't get online. You had to find someone or go find a book at the library, which I had little kids, and that didn't happen. Anyway, so when I found out I could do this, it was very exciting. And I started with some very basic tutorials and totally addicted to the thrill of seeing code run. It's cool. And it's like, and no one that I know in my real life, family, friends, nobody codes, nobody understands it. And so when I try to explain it, it's kind of like trying to explain what a speech language pathologist does in a rehab setting, but in a different way. I just explain it it's like a puzzle, and you put the pieces together, and it's really exciting when they all fit. It's like that, but on a way bigger scale. And it would be I did an internship for 7 months, which only proved to me that I am absolutely on the right track. I got up every morning so excited about what the day was going to bring, and things that I did on the weekend to support it. It was just like, it was great. I don't do that in my regular job, I have to say. I enjoy my job. When I'm there, I'm fully, like, if anyone here has a family member that I'm working with, don't despair. I am fully engaged with your family member, and I enjoy it, but it's completely different, and it's what I want to do.
That's great. I'm going to shift to a couple of the questions that I saw in the Q&A. I'm going to piggyback on how we were talking about DEI before, and the question is, can DE&I become a higher focus with a shift to remote? If inclusion is seeing diversity in the workplace, was the traditional on-site 24/7 model potentially holding DE&I back? Ooh, what a good question.
I can go first. I mean, I personally don't think it's holding DE&I back. I think there's not going to be a one size fits all model, right? So I think the pre-pandemic one size fits all model of having to be in the workplace for most companies may have actually been holding DE&I back, because you are now opening up the door for a lot more diversity to actually have flexible and work-life balances. So, but I think you need to just think about, how do you create those communities, and how can you keep people engaged in either a hybrid work model or remote work model, right? So I think we're seeing, a lot more companies being very creative on it, right? Whether it's maybe it's not physically walking through the office, right? But if it's having, meetup sessions after work for women, right? I know like my previous employer, we had tons of different kind of panel discussions. We had tons of just kind of fun things that we would do remotely together. So I do think that there is a way to promote DEI. You just have to be a little bit more creative about it from a remote perspective. But again, it's not going to be a one size fits all. So I think you'll see it hybrid. So you'll see people walking through the office that maybe look like you, but also have ways of engaging remotely.
Yeah, I agree with what Ashley said, and I would just add, I think it opened the current climate creates more opportunity for more diversity because you can hire in a greater geography. You know, if you look at the geography of New England or New Hampshire, Maine, it's pretty heterogeneous. It's pretty white. It's older, and now you can hire from anywhere around the globe. So I think that creates more opportunity for diversity on hiring. The challenge is the inclusion part. So you might have greater success with hiring diverse talent. And then the challenges in the remote environment is the inclusion and the retention, because it's harder to build relationships, make friends, have connections. And so that is a challenge. And, you know, I think companies are being creative, you know, trying to do remote events. We do lots of remote social events, you know, everything from bingo to Connect Four and talent shows online. And I mean, we've tried many different types of fun events remote, but it's more than that. It's building those professional connections that does create that inclusion piece being a bit harder.
I'm going to go on the remote because we've talked about how important the mentoring is. And so we have talked about mentoring, maybe if you had an open Zoom connection, but how else do you think do you mentor? Because especially if you have younger women coming up or other people, if you need to mentor up, how are we going to do that in a remote environment?
I mean, it can be done. I mean, it's similar concepts to what you would do which in person, is have regular meetings with the person, have goals set out at the beginning. You know, I did a mentoring program before COVID for someone who was in Spain, and I mentored them from New Hampshire, and this was pre-COVID, and it worked great. But it's all about the program itself. You know, what are the goals for the program? What are the goals for the person? Regular touch points, availability for reach outs for questions, confidentiality and trust between the two people, and then helping your mentee with whatever challenges they're facing. Sometimes it's technical challenge. Sometimes it's, more often than not, it's interpersonal challenge with coworkers or a manager or a male colleague who's not listening to the suggestions, or is interrupting you in a meeting. I mean, this is classic run-of-the-mill, women getting kind of stepped on in meetings. So it's mentoring. I think it can still be done remotely. It's just all about building the relationship and the trust and having goals. What does the person want to get out of the mentoring?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little bit different with, you know, informal versus formal mentorship, right? So informal mentors may develop naturally or organically if you're in person or with people who maybe you have access to, right? But it's really having companies think about creating some formal mentorship programs where, you know, kind of based off of those key things that Jillian just mentioned. And, you know, I know for the one that I'm rolling out right now, I mean, it's global. We're a global firm. We're in over 34 countries. I mean, in one meeting, I can be with people with 10 different countries. I mean, it's, you know, it's very possible to collaborate that way. So same thing like Jillian with, you know, her mentoring somebody in Spain, you know, I'll be mentoring somebody in Bulgaria. You know, we do try and sort of sync up the time zones to make it a little bit easier. So I'm not putting somebody in, you know, Arizona with somebody in Singapore, but, you know, it is very possible, but it is, I think it's more possible through those formalized programs, right? Because otherwise I wouldn't walk by the office and talk to that person in Bulgaria unless, you know, I'm there visiting for a week. So
Great. One other question. This one is near and dear to my heart. Do we think the changes in the workplace, specifically work-life balance and remote work, will attract more women to STEM and IT career paths earlier on? We kind of touched on it with Linda, but I see a lot of women and a lot of young girls when I go visit high schools that don't see themselves in STEM. And people and other people who just don't see themselves in STEM. How do we get more people thinking of STEM? Is it the work-life balance? Is it partly because if you can have that remote work and partially remote? Lisa touched on it on hers of why she works the way she does because of the work-life balance. Is this going to help women be like, okay, the women who stepped out of the workforce because of COVID and they needed to take care of families or do whatever they needed to do, that are now thinking, okay, it's getting time where I can dip my toes back into it. Is the remote work going to help?
I think it's going to help, but I still think there's the issue of young women and math avoidance, or young girls maybe in elementary school love math, and I think the research shows come high school they drop out of the advanced math. And why is that? And I don't know the answer to that. So I do think the remote work certainly will help attract women because it's a great work-life balance opportunity. But I still think there's a challenge somewhere in the schooling that we don't lose people by them not identifying as a STEM student. And I don't know how to overcome that, but I think that still exists.
Yeah. I think just the earlier we can introduce it to, to girls at the youngest ages possible, the more we're going to see increase. So obviously, like everyone said, the remote work will help increase it. And maybe if there's even more mothers now who are shifting careers because they see, oh, this was something I was always interested in, but it didn't really allow me the flexibility, or I never saw myself being able to really do it, going back to, a career in technology. Maybe there's children, young girls who will see their mothers doing it now versus their fathers, right? So all of these things combined are really, really important. I think it's really just introducing it as early on and having, organizations taking part in different programs, having, whatever it is we can do to set that up. It's going to take change over time, but I think we're already seeing a huge increase, right? I mean, think about it from Linda, when you were talking about when you were, when you first went into a different career. It's so different now than it already was, 20 years ago. And I think we'll just see that increase and shift.
So Ashley, I would agree with that. And partially the representation is so important. And I have a daughter who actually is a developer now, and she was introduced to programming in high school. She had two parents who were engineers. Although I had taken a break to be home with my kids, but she was surrounded by it, and she was a junior maybe in high school before she jumped into STEM. And I do think that representation is important. Seeing women who are in the workplace, who are loving coding. Thank you, Linda. I'm so glad to have you as a person who loves coding as much as I do. It is important, right? And to be doing panels like this, talking about it, I think is huge.
Yeah, the flexibility is not something that a young girl cares about, or the ability to have time at home with my kids. They're not thinking about that. So as Jillian said, we got to hit them early. And what I have learned is you do not have to be mathy to succeed. I am not mathy. Maybe some things come more slowly to me. The people who are mathy understand certain ways to get around math problems, which is part of the whole problem solving thing. But I can learn those. And so I don't know what the answer to that is either as at a younger age, but it's not just math. It's a whole nother thing. It's puzzles.
I completely agree, and it's one of my personal pet projects, as a lot of you, even out in the audience, knows too. I do have one last question that I want to do that's really kind of an interesting one. Do you feel companies can benefit from adopting different work schedules for its employees, like 6 to 3 shifts or even off hours? And this person keeps on hearing 4 days on, 3 off, more and more. So do you think that a different work schedule might actually help bring more people to tech or have them stay with it? Because not only do we need the people, we need to keep them too.
I mean, I think so, yes. Again, I don't think there's going to be a one size fits all, and it's going to depend on the company and where their people are located, and what your role within that company is, right? Are you working directly with your clients, and do you need to be on the same schedules as them? I mean, for me, again, I'm in a very global company. I lead a team of 30 people personally. Within that team, I mean, we're across 4 different time zones, right? So it's, for me, and when I've been hiring people recently, they'll ask me, what are my hours? And I say, your hours are get your work done. Like, get your work done, and whenever that is, right? And I'll say, you're going to be working with people across different time zones, so you can be flexible, right? So if you need to work 10 to 6 instead of 9 to 5, or I start my mornings very, very early to be online with my team, and then I can take a break in the afternoon, right? And I have people that work for me, and they say, I need to make sure I can bring my child to, drop off school and pick them up. And I say, that's fine. Like, do your stuff around it. Like, it doesn't matter to me when you work, as long as you're getting your work done and you're doing it well, right? So I think you'll see a lot of companies be flexible, and because they're hiring more people remotely in different locations, you're gonna have to be. It's not everyone's in the office at that same time period every day.
Totally agree. And it's the same for our company. We already operate that way. People just work it out with their manager, and some programmers like to work really late at night and to midnight, and start at a different time, and it's just get your work done, and there's less concern over the schedule, except for those departments like tech support that are have to be available for customer support. So there are roles that are on a schedule, but then even those roles are usually around the clock. So if someone wants a 6 to 3 or a 3 to 11, it's usually available.
I was a coder who liked to code at night, personally.
Is that because I feel like we have a bunch of people like that too.
It's like it takes a little while to get it all flowing, and then once it flows, you don't want to stop. It just kind of like goes. I'm going to put it this way. Think of coding like those of you who would have written that college paper at the very last minute when it's due at midnight. That same productivity, we got it. Okay, we got one other question before I think we will be wrapping it up. But one other question came in. How do you promote equity among women in the workplace? Anyone? Sure.
I mean, in my position, I try really, really hard to hire women into leadership roles. I'm not always successful, but I beat the drum with my leadership team that we need more women in leadership. So it's advocating internally and doing the same thing for internal promotions and succession planning, and for supporting women who are coming up in the workplace with support. So again, whether it's formal mentors or informal mentors, it's supporting them in the workplace and a lot of coaching. And it's also addressing inequity when it happens. So I look at pay inequity. It's I can't tell you how many times during salary reviews I look at a team, group of people, all with the same job title, and the woman is the lowest paid. I flag that and I say, why is this? And this shouldn't be, and let's fix it. And many times I think if I wasn't flagging that, things would just carry on and no one would think about it. And so it's really being an advocate in so many ways and sticking up for women when they're mistreated. But there needs to be leaders at the top who are there to really back up women in the tough situations. So I have been lucky in that regard. There are times when a manager might not take the coaching from someone on my team, but because I'm higher up the hierarchy than him, if it comes to me, then he'll accept what I'm saying. And if not, I know that I can go to my boss if I need to, who's the CEO. So advocacy is huge. It's really huge. And it's usually, sometimes it's a lot behind the scenes.
Excellent. We have, I think, 3 minutes to end up, and I just saw one last question. What ideas can companies benefit from to demonstrate their commitment and sensitivity to the importance of diversity, so future employees feel comfortable and supported entering a new work environment? Any thoughts? I think the mentoring is really important. And then talking about, and I know I'm not a panelist, but I'm trying to judge ideas for you all. But I think mentoring is really important there as well.
And I think it comes back to what people have said. It's the representation. And maybe I'm not 100% if this is what the person was asking, but onboarding is really important. So if it's someone new coming into the company, is there a good onboarding program, where they get introduced and they learn about the company, and maybe they're assigned a buddy, someone they could kind of rely on in the first 30, 60, 90 days, someone that's not their manager. So those are a few thoughts.
I also think I mentioned this, I think, earlier with something as the allyship, right? So obviously we need women supporting women, but we really need men as allies in the workplace, especially in technology. I think it's 16% of senior level tech jobs are held by women. Only 10% of women are in the executive level for technology, right? So that's a really small percentage. So it's also really kind of coaching and mentoring and training and having men as allies in the workplace. And I know some companies, my previous company at BCG, much more well-established firm, we had a allyship program where we had men as allies. They went through different training, they took part in different events, they promoted it within their teams, right? And so it really helps infuse it as part of the culture. I think this is really important. Not every company is going to have those same resources. We talked about that, but I know at my firm, I met with our CEO yesterday. He was in town from Switzerland. He held a lunch for the women in our office as part of, this is a huge, it's really important to him. So he's having us kind of roll out some bigger programs like the mentorship program that I'm doing, but he's also just doing little things to show it through every day and action, right? Not just with lunches, but also, some other things. So I think, any sort of allyship is going to be very important for companies.
Well, thank you, ladies. Marie has just popped on, so this is her time to wrap everything up. I just want to tell you thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me, and thank you, Women in Technology, for asking me to be here today.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you to our awesome panelists. We got Ashley, Jillian, Linda, and Lisa. Definitely really great perspectives that we're happy you could share today. And for moderating, Kim, thanks for that. A special thanks to Stephanie and New Hampshire Tech Alliance for helping us host this event and put this on through the remote platform. Always very helpful. And then lastly, just want to invite everybody to join our fall event. So this will typically, we try to do a hybrid. So there'll be options for in-person and remote, whichever you prefer there. And it's typically in October. So we'll send some more details as we near that event. Keep an eye out via email and social media for more details there. But we'd love to have you join us. So thanks again for joining today, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.